in a position to mold this properly. Today, you have 366(29)(a) still in the Constitution. It has not been taken out from the Constitution. There is no amendment bill. If that be the case, deemed sales continues to be in the Constitution. And some of those deemed sales today don't seem to be figuring as goods at all in the GST Act. They figure as services, some of them. So therefore, if GST is introduced in this model format and 366(29)(a) continues to be on in the Constitution, many of these provisions will become unconstitutional. To the extent they don't want to tax intangibles and throw it as services, it will not be possible to administer this law. They will have to bring about some specific saving clause in the Constitution to protect GST. I don't know if they're aware. I think probably you can tell them, open their eyes and tell them this is what it is. Because when they got up with the first amendment bill, they wanted to delete 366(29)(a). But then they realized if they do that, all the pending matters will collapse. All the pending matters will become unconstitutional. So they kept 366(29)(a), but mod the GST model in a totally different way. So some amount of mismatch is there. We'll come to mismatch when we see credit mechanism, how it flows. Input services is the third component. We did with capital goods, we saw inputs. Next is input services. Input services, you see all this, please be careful about these definitions. In all these definitions, you will find a wording, subject to exceptions as may be provided under the Act or rules. That means, through the Act and rules, they are going to exclude certain input services and inputs from the scope of credit. And once they do that, your cascading effect theory will not work. Cascading effect theory will not work. Input services also is very wide. Outward supply in the course or furtherance of business. So chartered accountant services, lawyer services, everything will be input services. Very wide, extremely wide. So this is the scope of SENVAT credit as far as credit is concerned. From my reading of this, it appears that if the exceptions are small, then we will be able to really enjoy this more SENVAT credit than we have been doing today. But there are already some exceptions in the Act because the Act itself excludes certain things which we will come to in course of time. Please understand, when I say furtherance of business means, what is business? Next we need to, have you dealt with that, Madhukar? Oh, no. What is business? You look at this. What is business will keep us in business for the next 20 years? What is business? Business to include trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation or any other similar activity. There is one thing which is left out. Occupation. What is the difference between occupation and vocation? For occupation and profession, occupation and trade. Anybody? Anyone? Because post-lunch, it has to be interactive. I am already finding some people, finding it difficult to open their eyes. I know that they're in mid-afternoon meditation, but nevertheless. Huh? Meditation. I don't even ascribe to them this napping. I tell they are in meditation, deep meditation. What is the difference between occupation and vocation? Anybody can tell? Anyone? Just for discussion. The term occupation is very wide. See, you have to look at it this way. Let us assume that I am running a college Let us assume Institute of Chartered Accountants. What is it? It's a body which controls what? Profession. Profession. Let us assume that I am running an educational institution. What is it? Is it a trade? Persons who are sitting may be treating it as a trade. Per se education, is it a trade? No. Is it commerce? Is it manufacture? Is it profession? Is it vocation? This is what many people said. But Supreme Court said in TMA Pai's case, AR 2003, you will find this decision. It is an occupation. Education is a occupation. It is not meant for profit. So strictly speaking, we can take actually when GST comes, we will say that education sector is out of GST completely. Completely out of GST. Any other similar activity doesn't include occupation. We can say that. Any transaction incidental or ancillary to the above, that is to business. Frequency of transactions is not a criterion. If you do a one-off business transaction, it becomes a business. They say club, association, society providing benefits to members becomes business. This one, let me tell you, in Calcutta Club's case, has been referred to the larger bench with the Supreme Court in the context of whether principle of mutuality will apply to a club or a society. Can it be said that the principle of mutuality applies to a club or society when it comes to sale of goods? When it comes to rendering services, can the principle of mutuality apply or it will not apply? What do I mean by that? I mean this, when a club, let us say, renders certain services to its members, can it be said that the club is rendering services to its members? Can you say that? Or is it that the club is an agent of the members? This is the issue that has gone up to the larger bench of the Supreme Court. Because if you were to say that it is an agent of the members, no tax will survive. But if you were to say that they are separate from the members, tax will survive. So this has gone to the larger bench of the Supreme Court. They have also said admission to a premise is consideration. That means I give you access to a place. Let us assume that in this, you are letting somebody inside this hotel at a fee, or letting somebody inside an entertainment park for a fee. That is called a business. Now we will come to what is input tax. Unlike what you have seen in Senvat credit, input tax means tax completely on the input side, whether it's capital goods, whether it is capital goods or input services, it is as a compendium, it is called input tax. Now input tax as a credit is given to you as a whole. And another important distinction is, if you pay tax on the reverse charge mechanism, it is known and called as input tax. It is no more an output tax. Reverse charge mechanism, I pay the tax, you know very well. I pay the tax. That becomes an input tax for me and I can take credit. You had a lot of litigation on this, whether it is input tax or whether it is output tax, and all these matters went up to the High Courts and High Court settled it in one way or the other. GST makes a good beginning where they say that this will be treated as input tax. So if you pay reverse charge mechanism, you can take it as input tax. Similarly, there are three components of tax which come in here. One is the CGST, which is called the central government supply tax. SGST, which is the state government. IGST, which is, what is IGST? Who collects it? Yes. IGST is collected only by the central government. The state governments have no authority to collect it. IGST is collected on what components? Interstate sale includes import of goods or services. So when you import goods and services also, IGST will be collected. How will it be distributed is another issue which we will have to see at length. I will tell you one small issue which comes up. Let us assume I import SAP software in Bombay and I allow all my businesses across the country to access it. In other words, to use the server which is, use the software which is located on a central server. Tax would have been paid in the state of Maharashtra. How would tax have to be transferred to the other states where utilization takes place? In IGST, how would it happen? I pay IGST when I import the software. Software is kept in Bombay, let us say. Where is the place of service to be restricted to the place where the item is kept, or is it going to be spread across the place where it is going to be utilized? Do we have to transfer that credit to all the states where it is utilized? This is one of the questions that has to be answered. If you look at the today's draft, it appears that at the point of receipt it stops. That means all the tax will be kept in Bombay. Huh? Huh? It's at the draft of the thing, it looks like receipt is the criteria. Let me tell you, it's not that easy to solve this. I can tell you a reason also. Even in the European VAT, they are having this difficulty. You get it into one location, use it across various locations. How do I distribute the tax? Who's to enforce the distribution of this tax? This becomes an issue. So we have to wait and see for that portion of it. Input service distributor, more or less the definition is on the same lines as it was here, except that you can also distribute IGST, you can also distribute CGST as the case may be. Now we will come to the main provision of the section, how you take credit. Or is there a time limit to take these credits? See, once you do not pay GST on some commodity, the question of taking credit will not come. If you don't pay GST, credit is not going to be allowed. So they will have to bring about, the tax part of it meaning?
So if you can go on the slide which talks about the input tax.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not covering the tax which I may be paying on, say, petroleum, the 5 categories which are exempt. So that is also not allowed.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not, in fact, even under the existing SENVAT credit rules, you can't take credit on petrol. It is excluded from the definition of inputs. Even though you are paying excise duty at enhanced rates. Even today you are not able to take credit because they have I told you this, they have a lurking suspicion that it will be used for personal purposes. Lurking suspicion, as I call it. So that position will continue unless by rules they allow it, and I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening. In fact, they should allow. If you ask me, there is a decision of Karnataka High Court in Renuka Sugars case, where they said, cess you can take SENVAT credit. It's a very controversial decision pending the Supreme Court. Unlike SENVAT credit, registration becomes a must for taking GST credit. In SENVAT credit, there is no requirement for registration. You could take credit, could offset, but in GST, that is not going to be the case. You have to be a registered person for the purpose of taking credit. This is the first thing that you should understand. Now, the first time I am getting into GST, there are some newspaper reports which say that you should take GST within 1 year. The document, there is a time restriction of 1 year. It's not so. It is not so. There are two types of time limits that are specified. In the GST, the first time you get into SENVAT, that is into the GST regime, whatever inputs you have in stock, you can take credit, provided it is supported by a document which is not more than 1 year old. CS certificate. For what? No, please don't extend your jurisdiction everywhere. You are putting too much of work on Mr. Madhukar. You want everything to be certified by you, every damn bloody thing to be done. Anyway, audit has been given. What more you require? You have audit. Have a field day. Because they can't go to anybody else other than you. They will come to you. For this purpose, you see what happens is they may rely on a certificate. We don't know. So once the rules come out, they may say instead of you getting into the documentation, you take a CS certificate. But I'll warn you one thing. One thing I will warn you. Most of the problems of professional ethics came about in CA certification of advanced licenses. I think you will agree with me. Certifying left, right and center that this is imported products have been used for export, even without verifying the stock ledgers. Same way, please make sure in this that if they are carrying forward the credit or taking the credit for the first time, supposing I am liable to GST today, I have stocks with me. I must make sure that the documents which support that stock credit should not be more than 1 year old. And that onus, if you ever have that onus, it is very tough for you. You have to go by, established methods of LIFO, FIFO, all that to find out. So that is the time limit that is prescribed here. As far as time limit on a general, ongoing basis, there are different provisions which I will come to. Then the section says if some goods are used for business, non-business purpose, or what they say is other purposes, then by rules they will divide the credit. In other words, if I am utilizing, let us say as Mr. Atul Gupta was mentioning, I make a phone call to Babi. Business, other purposes. So input, they may bring about a proportion in rules. Don't be sure that you will get 100% of the credit. They may still have some rules which will assume that 20% of your calls goes to Babi. Huh? No, anything can happen in this country. Rule making is, when the authority is vested with the power to make rules, his rules will be so good that he will sustain your practice for 25 years. Another set of rules, you see here, there are two sets of rules. Taxable, non-taxable. Business, other purposes, taxable, non-taxable. 4 categories are there. Business, you have seen the definition of business. Personal purposes. So there is one threshold, business, personal, where they will take out. Taxable, non-taxable. What do you mean by that? You may have tax, but it may be exempt. You may be chargeable to tax, but you may be exempt. Not zero rated. Exempt. Zero rated supplies is defined in GST as those services or supply of goods on which you can take SENVAT credit or which you can take GST credit, which is exports. Essentially it is exports. So please understand taxable, non-taxable, chargeable. There is a difference between what is chargeable and what is liable. Can you tell me what is the difference? This is very important to understand SENVAT credit. What is the difference between chargeable and liable? What is the difference between what is chargeable, what is liable? Anyone? Extremely important for us to understand.
Or any benefits available, that is a secondary thing, but chargeable is there, so liability would be there or would not be there.
Correct. So please understand, chargeability is a subject matter of levy, liability is a subject matter of assessment. Please just understand this. If I am chargeable to tax means it is a subject matter of the levy. I may or may not be liable. That is why if you see in the existing Finance Act, who is liable to be registered is a person who is liable to pay tax. It's not, does not say who is chargeable to tax. Why are lawyers not registered? Why are doctors not registered? They are all chargeable to tax, but they are not liable. There is no liability because there is an exemption notification. So please keep this in mind as he correctly put it. Chargeability is levy, liability is assessment. Here if you look at the registration provisions which somebody else will deal with, it will talk of even if you are not liable, once registered you have to file. That way. So we'll leave that out. Taxable, non-taxable means what? Taxable supply means I am chargeable. Non-taxable means I am not at all taxable. Something akin to business or other purpose, something like that. So proportionate credit will be, like you have rule 6 of the Senvat credit rules today, same set of rules will come here. Same set of rules will come here. And what I am worried about is the next one, the second part of the slide, please see it carefully. Central government or state government would prescribe through notifications the manner in which credit can be attributed. This does not go to the GST council. This will be done by all the central governments and the state governments. That means each state government has the power now to issue notifications restricting credit. Karnataka will say one thing, Delhi will say, of course Delhi, so many things they say today. Delhi has I like the language used by in Delhi. It gives us a lot of entertainment. And the tax people only are innovative. Not only in mind, in language. Now you come to restriction. You please see the restrictions. Credit availment, motor vehicles, as I already told you. But you look at the second class. Goods and or services provided in relation to food, beverages, outdoor catering, etc., 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 etc. Cosmetic and plastic surgery. Why have they chosen this? I don't know. Poor fellows, should we not look good? Should the employees not look good? Don't they have a right to look good? A chartered accountant or a lawyer, he has to look good nowadays, Is it not there? When you go and present your case before a court of law, you tell me, should you not look good? Is it a crime for you to look good? And you look at it. Are used primarily for personal use or consumption of any employee. What do you mean by this? If it is used for personal use of an employee or for consumption of an employee, you are saying credit will not be allowed. What do you mean by this? Supposing I give you one, I give every employee lunch. Outdoor caterer comes and gives lunch. He raises a bill on me. Can I take credit? What do you say? You can't take. Tell me. Please tell me. See there. Outdoor catering. I had a similar matter in Bangalore. I got stay. How? The same thing comes in your Senvat credit rules. Identical. I said only one thing. All this, when you say primarily for personal use or consumption of an employee, means that it's part of his salary package. Perquisites given to him. Those perquisites is not meant to be taken as a credit. But when it applies to my business, it is used in the furtherance of business, I can take credit. So in my view, this clause, though controversial, this clause you will be able to take credit on common things that you give across employees. That they are not interested in you keeping your boys happy, my dear. Department doesn't want you to be happy nor them to be happy. All your boys should be sad, you should be sad, they should get the tax. Simple formula. So this clause also will go up for litigation. In fact, there is a decision of the Bombay Tribunal in Hindustan Coca-Cola which allows the benefit of these things. But of course, that will also be subjected to, I think in Bangalore there was one judgment which went against the assessee because they were not, in fact, that very same judge gave me stay. I don't want to mention this, but the very same judge gave me stay after I argued this matter, saying that this is meant to be only a disincentive for where it is part of perquisites as per section 17 of the Income Tax Act. There. Goods, services acquired by a principal in execution of works contract, resulting in construction of immovable property except plant and machinery. There is a restriction on credit. If it results in an immovable property, you do not get. It's very unfortunate because this matter actually, this is following. Karnataka High Court actually took a contrary view, SLR Steel's case, you will find it. Karnataka High Court saying